microphones, it's time to mob it up. We're the Colts crew, ain't no one above us. Breaking down the news, rumors and games, keeping it real, no one can tell. Every Tuesday, bringing that heat with special guests. Reporters will meet players in the house, bringing the A game. Talking about the Colts, we're all about the fame. We're the hottest sports podcast, no doubt. Covering the Colts, hear the fans shout. From Lucas Soil to the Super Bowl, with a horseshoe mob, keeping you in the fold. Let's go, let's go. Horseshoe mob, we're storming through the town. Harris, Austin, Josh, and Chris, we never slow down. Everything Colts, we got the blue pride, making Indianapolis proud. We're taking this ride on the pretty vine. We're a force to be reckoned with every touchdown. We keep the city beckoning, we bleed blue. Our love for the Colts run deep, we'll keep cheering. We're the hottest sports podcast, no doubt. Covering the Colts, hear the fans shout. From Lucas Oil to the Super Bowl, with a horseshoe mob. Yeah. Sports podcast, no doubt, covering the Colts.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. I know it looks a little different. It's a different intro, but you know what? I like it. I'm pretty sure y'all like it. We like it. So yeah. Now I know that we all see, well, we've seen the flyers, but today we have a very special guest. And he's a special guest because I had a chance to briefly collaborate with him last week on Stadium. Make sure you download that with the NFL Fan Draft Special. And you know what? He's here, right? It's just like anybody that comes on, they're not just special guests. They become family, right? So we're gonna in a second introduce the newest member of the family. But in the meantime, welcome back to the HorseShoe Mob podcast. We're covering everything Colts, and we slander some Titans fans every now and then. I mean, after all, Will Levis is the only person who has a endorsement by Hellman's, probably ever. But I mean, listen, we're not going to talk about that. So before we get started, first off, make sure that you're going to www.fanbattlesports.com for all your AFC South needs. But you're not here for the AFC South, you're here for the Colts. So make sure that you go there for all your Colts-related stuff, media, articles, past episodes, everything. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and introduce all the guys and then get to our special guest tonight. So we have with us Harish Nukala.
It's a great night in Indianapolis or Texas, or both, actually. It's just a really good night. I'm very excited.
Fantastic. I love your enthusiasm. We have Austin Cook.
What's up? I'm Austin.
We have Josh Sr.
What's good, everybody? Final boss in the building.
Okay, we're not going to do that. All right, and then I'm Chris Jackson. And so, yeah, let's just get right to it. We have with us special guest, Colts faithful. You'll remember him. You'll remember his stint with us. If not, then you know what? He's here to make sure that we not only remind you, but also just give us some stuff. We're fresh off the draft, so without further ado, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to lead it into Stadium's very own, the Ohio State's very own, Colts' very own. Like I say, he was a Colt, so he's a Colt for life. All right. We have with us our special guest, Josh Perry. Everybody clap it up for the guest. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate you being here. And yeah, tell the people about yourself.
Yeah, well, first off, I appreciate you having me on here. Not exactly sure a lot of people are going to remember my stint with the Colts, so that's perfectly fine. I enjoyed my time in Indianapolis. I've told a lot of people, just looking back on my NFL career, spent different time in different places. That was the most fun locker room that I got to be in, and it wasn't a good season by win-loss record, but I definitely made some good connections there. I'm just a kid from the state of Ohio, a Midwest guy. Played my college ball at The Ohio State University. Was a champion there in 2014, was a 2016 draft pick to the then San Diego Chargers and spent a little time on their roster, made my way over to Indianapolis. As I said, I loved it there. Circle City was awesome. And then finished out my career in Seattle. Wasn't a long time, but it certainly was a good time. Shortly thereafter, I transitioned into media, started off covering Ohio high school football and the Buckeyes. And from there, it just kind of took off. Started covering Big Ten football at large. Ended up doing this daily show at Stadium, which has been awesome for the last couple of years. And we've got a bunch of different interactive content that's all on streaming. If you people want to check that out, we have a wonderful app that you can get on. We love integrating the voice of the people. So I'm certainly glad we were able to have you on last week. I thought that was a home run for us to be able to collaborate with creators that are very familiar with the different teams that everybody's talking about around the draft. And in the fall, covering Big Ten football with NBC Sports has been a wild journey there. We just finished up year one with that project, just got the media rights, and it was phenomenal. We've got 4 new teams coming in, so it's going to be a hell of a season. But I'm just an old football guy. That's all I am right now. I'm excited to talk a little ball with y'all.
Hey, we're excited to have you because, like I said, we're coming off of we like to call it football Christmas, where we get to see all the new players coming in and all the new weapons that QBs and defenses are going to get. So yeah, it's going to be a fun time. Now, I'm guessing you had a chance to look at the draft. You had a chance to watch the draft for the most part. Before we get into the Colts draft, what were some of the surprises that you saw in the draft?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, they call me the big sicko around the office. I watch anything football all the time, so I watched all 3 days of it, which is a crazy thing to do. I don't recommend. Well, I think the biggest surprise for everybody was what happened at pick number 8, right, with the Atlanta Falcons going with Penix Jr. I don't think it's that crazy when you really distill it down. You have to think about quarterbacks totally differently. You bring in Kirk Cousins, 35 years old, coming off of an Achilles, $100 million guaranteed. Seems like a lot of money. I was asking this question around the office. I'll ask it to the group, and then I'll make my point here. Does anybody know what Jarrett Stidham's contract situation is for the Broncos? Is anybody aware?
No.
Okay.
It expires at the end of next season, doesn't it?
Yes, and it's not.
Yeah, so they don't have a quarterback on the roster.
It's 2 for $10 million, right?
Yeah.
Go through some other quarterbacks. I think Jacoby Brissett's going to make $8 million this year. Sam Darnold's going to make 8.5 this year. And I'm saying that to say that these are backup level NFL quarterbacks that are making between $5 and $8 million.
Yeah.
Michael Penix Jr. will make an average of $5.7 million on his rookie deal. Is it that crazy to say that you can get a starting caliber quarterback to be your backup just in case if he has to play, you probably feel good about it, and you get him cheaper than some of these awful backup quarterbacks that we see? So it was kind of crazy, but ultimately I like the move. And then the other one, and it'll lead right into the Colts pick. 14 offensive players hurts my heart. As a linebacker, I'm sick. I'm ill. It feels like defense ain't getting no love right now, and I get it's an offensive league, but it was crazy to see in real time the run on offensive players. You had the quarterbacks, you had a mix of wide receiver and offensive line there, and I'm thinking like we're really at a point where Bo Nix, no shade, is a top 12 pick in the NFL draft because that's how much they value offense in this league right now.
Bo Nix being taken there. I mean, I knew that there was going to be a run on quarterbacks, but I didn't anticipate Bo Nix being taken before a single defensive player. I mean, I think even when we did the draft last week, I think they had like Quinion Mitchell was gone prior to, which was just absolutely ridiculous because you let Quinion Mitchell fall to the one situation where he'll be able to come in and either be a starter from day one or he'll be able to sit behind Darius Slay. Like,
right.
It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. But I mean, that's the way the league is trending now.
How is that always the one team that just happens to benefit from stupidity? Sorry, I'm going to call it stupidity, or what you can call it craziness. I'm going to call it stupidity, but it always seems to be like the Eagles benefit from like the madness. Quinion Mitchell falling to them. And I'm not going to complain because we actually benefited from it too this year, right? But I think the other piece to that is, I heard a couple years ago, so I can't remember who it was on the radio. He said, if I was an NFL GM, I'm swinging at quarterback every single year until I find one. Because once I do, I'm set. Like, I have nothing to worry about. And maybe that's the thinking of the Falcons is, okay, maybe Kirk Cousins gives them 8 or 9 wins. But if Penix sits for a year and the next year they go 11-5 or 12-4 or whatever that is, those records are these days, and then he leads them for the next 10, 15 years, then they're set. They don't have to worry about losing these picks.
Yeah,
So
and
I
I
think
think
it's
there
that
was
philosophy.
I talked to one of my colleagues, Jake Butt, who played at Michigan. I do a show with him, and he covers Big Ten football as well. And he said every year he'd draft a quarterback. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, first round, but he said every year he'd do it. And I think it's an interesting thing because if you can find a difference maker, that's as cheap as you're going to get them is on the rookie deal. Like we see what's going on with Brock Purdy right now. And I don't think anybody ever anticipated he was going to play like that. But you feel like you are playing at a huge advantage when you have him that cheap, because now you can really build a roster that's a contender because you're not dedicating so much money to your quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other piece was, and I read this somewhere, but the Falcons apparently, even in Kirk's deal, they do have an out after year 2, where I do believe
Yep.
that they would have a cap hit of $32 million if they decided to move on after year 2. Where, I mean, if you have Michael Penix, who's coming in as a rookie this year, in the second year, if for some reason he outperforms Kirk, then you can pretty much just, get rid of him, and that you have your guy for the foreseeable future. So, I mean, knowing all that, I think in the moment it looked like a crazy enough deal, but when you really just look at the layers of it, it's actually a smart deal because you know that you potentially got your guy.
Yeah, but you have less time to potentially build around that guy because right now what you're doing is you're trying to build a young team, and they've got a young team. They've pretty much got all the pieces offensively right around the quarterback.
Yeah.
I hope is that it's plug and play. But the other thing about the quarterback is Michael Penix is a lefty. So everything that you do and everything that you think about is the complete opposite. So now you're having to get a left tackle when Michael Penix is ready to play. Your blindside blocker has to be the right tackle because you have to block his blindside. And so it's like those mirror things that you have to think about now, maybe as your team building, is who's the guy that can play right tackle potentially as a left tackle. I guess if that's thinking that you have to do. And I don't know those intricacies, but being a lefty brings a whole nother dimension to it, in my opinion.
I've talked to coaches about that lefty thing because they're split on it. Some coaches are definitely what you said, where we're flipping everything because we have a lefty, right? So we gotta figure out the offensive line, our play concepts, like we're gonna flip them kind of where the reprogression starts. And other guys are like, I don't give a damn which hand you're throwing with. Like the offense is the offense. Like we are going to make it work, lefty, righty, whatever. So certainly that's something they're going to have to consider. Like, do you change what you're going to do philosophically because you got a guy out there spinning it with the left hand?
Yeah. And once again, it's just like, and like I said, we'll get into more of the Colts draft stuff, but I mean, it's not necessarily far fetched to have somebody come in. I think we've seen enough from Michael Penix, at least from a college standpoint, to know that if he's coming into this offense, he takes a year or two behind Kirk Cousins. That's only going to continue to make him better. But then also it's going to bring a whole different dynamic to that team because Kirk Cousins isn't going to be the type of threat that Michael Penix can be from a throwing perspective necessarily, but also from a mobility standpoint also. And I mean, with somebody like Bijan Robinson, having somebody like Kyle Pitts, those weapons now become a little bit more lethal because now you can utilize them in many different ways.
Yeah, watching Penix in the Big Ten when he was at Indiana, he didn't do this a ton at Washington, and we saw that his pro day at Washington. As a matter of fact, the boy can run. Like, don't be fooled. Like he's got some wheels. And Kirk is a super rigid dude. Like he is very much plays the game a certain way. He is athletically limited. And so to your point, you start looking at, some of the weapons, top tier type of guys. And if you got a quarterback who can at least threaten with his legs, it changes the math on defense.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So
what is age? What is Penix age?
I think he's 24.
Yeah, he's 24. So he's not that old, right? I mean, we've seen guys that are older that have gone in the first round, right? We've seen 26-year-olds. So
I think Whedon was like, what, 27?
Yeah, Whedon was like 27. We know that how that turned out. But I mean, 24 is not that. And again, is Cousins a 1-year guy, a 2-year guy? I don't really know. I think it depends on how does he perform, how does he feel after this year. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. it definitely is not something that I expected to see. And then, of course, I think the Broncos getting Bo Nix ended up being a panic pick.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
But
there's
yeah,
that.
but enough about the people who made panic picks, right? Because and we'll get right to it because Josh, you're a defensive guy, and the Colts have struggled with pass rusher previously, but Latu drops down all the way to 15. And what is your reaction at the pick?
So, we did the fan mock draft on Stadium, and I had the Falcons pick at 8 actually in that exercise, and I took Latu at 8. I thought he was the best defensive player in the draft. I easily thought he was the best rusher, and I know that people are looking at Dallas Turner and they're like, oh, he's got the flash and he's got the 40 time and all that kind of stuff. And I know that there are the injury concerns with Latu. I'll talk about that in a second. I flipped on the tape of this man when I was doing draft breakdowns, and he looks like a polished pass rusher. His hands are immaculate. They work really well with his feet. He's got a number of moves and tools in his tool belt, and he understands the art of pass rushing. And I actually learned this from Robert Mathis when I was in Indianapolis. I had not played edge rusher until I got there. I was an off the ball linebacker at 6'4", 255, which is crazy to think about right now. So they moved me closer to the line of scrimmage, and he's teaching me all these moves and how to be violent with your hands and like what to do. And what he told me, and it stuck with me, and I'll never forget it. He said, pass rushing is a thinking man's game. And I fully agree with that, because you have to understand who your opponent is and you have to set them up. You got your outside rush, and then, you got your counter off of that, whether that's an inside rush, whether that's a power rush, spin move, whatever the case is, you have your go-to rush and you have multiple counters, and you have to set them up throughout the game. And I'm watching Latu against USC and Caleb Williams.
Yep.
And that's exactly what he did throughout the game. I watched him. He hit speed up the field, almost got home. Next rush, he comes back. He hits a power rush with the long arm in there. Next rush, he comes back. He hits the inside rush. And that tackle had no idea what he was doing. And so you see the skill and the technique, but you also see a guy who understands the game of football from a pass rushing standpoint. And that was a differentiator for me and why he was the best rusher and best defensive player in this class. Then you get to the injury concern, and this is about who your orthopedic specialist is, and the doctors have to clear it. I have seen in my experience, and this happened at Ohio State, a freshman came in and he had a knee injury, and the doctors would not clear him. And I think it was because he was a little bit of a project take, and ultimately they wanted to get the scholarship back. Yeah. And he goes to an SEC school and plays for 4 years and becomes an NFL draft pick. And I think a year or two ago just signed for $52 million. So it's not the idea that these guys are disqualified because they're so broken that they can't play. Sometimes they're just disqualified because you're like, I kind of want that scholarship back, and I just don't know what your upside is going to be and if you're ever going to be that type of guy for us.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if that's what happened. I want to put that out there. One thing I do know is doctors get a chance to look at it. If he's cleared and they think it's not a problem, it's not a red flag, I'm 100% here for this pick. And quite frankly, I think 15 was good value for it.
Yeah. And I think one thing that they did mention was the fact that the diagnosis that they had to do was during COVID. So he had to basically just consult with doctors via Zoom calls, kind of like a teledoc kind of thing, to the point where it's just like he wasn't necessarily able to meet with anybody until he was able to speak to, and I believe it's Dr. Robert Watkins, the same doctor who was responsible for Peyton's neck surgery. And he said once he was able to do that, he was clear. But the craziest thing is, it's just like he was still physically active to an extent. And then you go into UCLA, because the piece that people aren't talking about is the fact that he sat out for 2 years. Then he went to UCLA and played for 2 years and was probably, I'm going to say, the top 3, if not the best rusher, in, I believe it was I think the Pac-10, or I think it was maybe even all of college football in those 2 years. So that's something
that's it.
Was, and that's something that I think is overlooked. I know that there was a lot of Colts fans that had their hearts set on Brock Bowers. So, when they took Latu, they were just like, oh, we got a pass rusher. And then they talked about neck injury. It's just like, no, he's injury prone. It's just like, I don't know that y'all know what's actually happening right now. Like, it was just very strange, like the progression of like how fans were. And then now they see him, he got a horseshoe tattoo on his arm, and they're just like, oh, we're all in. It's like, you know what? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with y'all.
I'll say this too. I think dudes who play out on the West Coast have been at a disadvantage because of the TV windows that they're playing in. Yeah. Unless you're a sicko like me, you're not watching Pac-12 after dark. And so you don't get to see him week in and week out. If you're playing Big Ten, you're playing the SEC, the ACC, people are watching those games. And now the team's coming over from the West Coast to the Big Ten. You'll be able to see him a little bit more. But I feel like he was a guy who flew under the radar for so many like casual fans, because if you're not watching noon and you're not watching 3:30, you're certainly not staying up to watch him play at 11:30 at night. And that's when he was doing his work.
Yeah. And you're right, because that was a tough time. I think that was a lot of them. I think one of the games that we can kind of go back to, and this was even Mountain Time, going back to Colorado State, where that game went all the way until I think it was like midnight, and then they had to go into overtime. So you're definitely at a disadvantage, because SEC games generally are either just prime time, 8:00, or like they're playing during the daytime where everybody can kind of catch them. Whereas, Pac-10 or whatever those games are, if they get a prime time game, you got to plan on being up past 10:00. And, I'm old, so I can't do it. Yeah, I ain't got it in me.
I think the other piece to all this is people don't realize like two of the teams that he faced and two of the guys that he went up against and Pac-12 After Dark also were first round picks. You look at Fuaga, Jordan Jordan Morgan from Arizona. Like, these guys were also first round picks. So he's balling out against other guys that are getting picked in the same round as he is. So yeah, I mean, and I think to your point there, Josh, people don't watch the Pac-12 and they don't hold the Pac-12 in as high regards as the other conferences. You could argue the Pac-12 was the best conference in college football last year. It's a very valid argument that you can make. There are a lot of talented teams in that conference, and that conference just ended up beating up on each other because they were so good. But he's gone up against a lot of first-round talent, and he's been successful. So I thought it was a great pick. I will admit, at first, I was in that Dallas Turner group, but then I did a little bit of research. I was like, oh, wait, I remember this guy. Oh, yeah, I definitely know. So, yeah, very, very happy because it is a position of need, and not specifically because of he plays in, but because of his disruptiveness, and we needed a disruptor on that other side of Kwity Paye, and I think this is going to help with that.
No doubt.
Yeah. So now moving on, and I know Harish is chomping at the bit to get to this one, but Adonai Mitchell, rumor came out that he's a type 1 diabetic and that he's tough to deal with. He's very much up and down. It's just like either he's the best locker room guy ever and the best teammate ever, or he's just the worst to deal with, and that it just makes no sense to draft him. So that was something that came out much later. Now, I don't know if you can kind of elaborate on the draft process, but information like that, is that something that is, I'm going to say, that's kind of time to see if maybe somebody can go ahead and get him at maybe a better pricing, or like, how does that go? Because that feels like that's something that would have came out maybe during like a combine interview or like a pro day interview.
Yeah, it's crazy. First off, using a young man's diabetes against him in the draft process is nasty work, but these teams will do anything. All's fair in love and football, I guess. But it's very intentional how information leaks, and we see it every single year. AD Mitchell is obviously the example from this year. We've seen in past years where, people will drop the character concerns. They'll drop concerns about the locker room. We saw it a year ago with CJ Stroud. He can't process because of some computer video game that they had him play, and his test score was super low. Dude goes out here and wins Rookie of the Year and also has MVP votes as a rookie with an offense where there wasn't a ton to work with. I think he elevated a lot of players And I think it was intentional that folks put that out there to see if he would drop to a position where they wouldn't have to go up if they wanted to draft him. And you can flip on the tape for what CJ was up against, and you can compare that with the test score and say, that's just not the case. Like, you can watch him process through the game as a quarterback and then be like, I'm just going to ignore that test score. The hard part about AD Mitchell's situation is you would have had to be somebody who was around him in the locker room and on the field to really understand if these rumors were true. Yeah. And I do think that's really foul. I think it's really good on Chris Ballard to say, I'm not going to believe that smoke. And this is not the first time that he's done this, where he's come out and just railed against people who put out this nasty information. But I think they ended up getting a really good player. I thought a guy who was bumping up against the first round for phenomenal value at pick 52. Super fast. He's big. He didn't drop anything in that last year at Texas. Like, it was very consistent. I think he translates into the NFL just based off of the traits alone. And then, you know, if you can try to get creative with him in terms of what you do in the system, I mean, all bets are off, right? So I love it for the Colts, but it's sad a kid has to sit there and have his character dragged through the mud.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's I mean, it stinks because that's the nature of what it is. I mean, like I said, I think one of the biggest stories that we saw was the year Laramie Tunsil came out. And then all of a sudden it's just like the gas mask bong video, and he drops, even though it's just like he was probably the best O-lineman in the entire draft off of that video alone. So, you know, it's weird because you see like the character assassination, and I like the fact that you say it's intentional, because I myself have been arguing with, you know, Colts fans about the fact that, yeah, there's no way possible that we would have gotten him if somebody didn't go out of their way to put that information out there, hoping that they would potentially drop to them. And I'm glad Chris Ballard spoke about that, because that was something that was just, it was disgusting. It was disgusting to say the least.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, right, how the information filters out. There's a book on every guy who's a draft prospect, and, you know, everybody's got their things, right? Like, you know, some dudes, they like women, some dudes like substances, like, you know, whatever the case is. Like, there's something about everybody. There's, you know, people are imperfect, and these teams all know it. And what we get to find out, what the public gets to find out, is very intentional in this process. So anytime something like this comes out, it's not an accident.
Yeah, and that's the reason why. But like I said, I know I already heard what you had to say about that, Josh. But I want to hear Austin. It's just like, because I know that we were definitely talking about making sure, like, hey, we need to get somebody. But, you know, what was your initial reaction to watching him drop the way that he did?
I mean, you got to feel bad for him, obviously. But, I mean, personally, for me, I was glad he dropped and we got him at 52. Because I think he's going to be great. He'll be, like, people can't double team Michael Pittman because we have him on the other side who doesn't drop anything, like Josh said. So, I mean, like, it's sad that he had to go through that. But, like, at the end of the day, it's just another chip on his shoulder that he'll have to go out there and prove, you know, that's not who he is. And I think it'll make him a better player.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and with you being a defensive guy, Josh, just like I said, never mean to move on from the Adonai. Then you go O-line back to back. And we don't just go with just best available. It's just like, it seemed like it's just like the two guys that you got were two guys that are probably going to be able to come in and make either an immediate impact with Bartoloni, and then, or just like Goncalves can come in. But when you go back to back in terms of O-line, and then before that you get an electrifying wide receiver, what kind of message does that send to Anthony Richardson coming off of the injury that he had last year, and then now just kind of like working through healing with the shoulder injury now?
I mean, it's wide receiver, offensive line, wide receiver, right? Like, that's the series of picks, and then they go back to addressing the defense, which I think was the right thing to do. It's telling your young quarterback that we want you to be successful. Yeah, one of your veteran wide receivers we already took care of, right? So like you got your
Yep.
guy out there, and we know that's the case. We're gonna bring you in a couple of young dudes who we feel like can really play and help you out. And oh, by the way, we're gonna make sure that you're protected because you got banged up last year. A
Yep.
little bit of that is on you. You got to know how to get down and slide a little. This is a sliding league. This isn't a league where you get to take hits. But
Yeah.
we're gonna make sure that we insulate you as best as possible. And I love it. And part of it is you have to do that with the young quarterback. Make sure that you can put talent around him, give him the best situation to be successful for his sake, for the sake of evaluating him. And if that's the guy moving forward, I also think when you're Chris Ballard and you're the GM that drafted kind of the project pick at quarterback 4th overall, you better do everything you can to make sure that this dude can go out there and play ball. So from every standpoint, I think the way that they drafted their, second, third, fourth, fifth round, absolutely. Like these are the things that they probably needed to do, and I love to see it.
No, and that's the reason why we wanted to kind of talk about that. But the biggest thing, and like I said, you mentioned the wide receiver pick. Now we don't know whether or not he's going to be integrated at wide receiver or whether he's just going to be a return guy. But we talked about that. Now, like I said, and I want to make sure that we get to everybody regarding these because everybody's like, well, we need a wide receiver, and then you get Mitchell, and then it's just like, oh, well, and the complaining ceases for a little while. Now, I myself, and I want to know this from the rest of the guys, knowing what we have with Alec Pierce, Downs, Pittman, now you have Adonai Mitchell, potentially Gould. Is Alec Pierce the odd man out?
Yes.
Oh, but you just said that he was going to the Hall of Fame the other day.
No, I said he was good. I said,
I'm sorry, Josh. You need to collect yourself. We can just go to Harish if you like. I mean,
No, I say get a bag, but getting Mitchell really hurt his position. I think he moved to a wide receiver 4, adding a guy like a 6'4" guy on the long side of Pittman. Like you said, he can stretch the field and open the middle of the field for other receivers. Pittman really didn't do that. I know a lot of people say that it was more so of not having a good quarterback that can do that. And Gardner didn't target him a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see what's happening next year with Anthony Richardson coming back and having all those targets to throw to. What Alec Pierce going into his 3rd year do.
Okay. And so same question for everybody and Josh, you as well. Does Alec Pierce end up being the odd man out in this scenario?
What does odd man out mean?
Odd man out basically is just like because you know that in Shane Steichen's offense, you're going to have like JT's going to be in there. You're going from what we saw last year, we saw that the offense he likes to incorporate. I'm going to say more tight ends more often than not. So if we're talking about like how the offense goes, mind you, this was the same team that I think went into the first game with I think 3 or maybe 4 wide receivers.
You only have 4 on the roster.
So only have 4 on the roster. Now the thing is, Alec Pierce for all intents and purposes, it's just like we like Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce is nice. He's he keeps his head down, he works, but for what could have been, I mean, I think we also saw that Josh Downs kind of like jumped over him in terms of like what you look at. Now you have Adonai Mitchell coming in, and Adonai Mitchell is a guy who potentially can go ahead. I think we've been looking for Alec Pierce to be like that wide receiver 2 guy, be that guy who's a little bit more dependable. And then now you have Adonai Mitchell coming in, who's potentially going to be, I'm going to say potentially because I use that word because we have yet to see him. Adonai Mitchell's coming in potentially being that wide receiver 2. Josh Downs, he's proven that he can make the tough catches, but you could possibly see him maybe in more of like a slot, possibly inside receiver. So now when it comes to Pierce, where does he now fit into that equation?
I think he's wide receiver 4. Like, and I think he makes the team. I think he fits into that. Like, he's going to be the guy that's the fourth man up, right? And I think that's the appropriate place for him.
Yeah.
I don't know when that transition occurs. I think getting Adonai as high as they did probably is definitely a warning shot to him, right? Hey, if you ain't ready to play, we got somebody that's ready to play. And I get the Gardner Minshew thing. Listen, Josh Downs is a rookie, played with Gardner Minshew too. He did just fine. And I understand, well, Alec did this and Alec did this. I mean, I just think it's year 3 at this point. And this is the way I see it. At this point, you either get in or you get out, because they've spent a second round pick on you, and there were some high expectations, and now you're potentially dropping to probably maybe even start the season at maybe 4 on the draft chart, at least in Shane Steichen's mind, right? Now, does it end up being that way? I don't know, but as of right now, yeah, I do think it feels like he's going to be the number 4 receiver.
Okay, what about you, Josh? I saw you. I saw your face. I was just like, okay, what we got?
I just know the way that this thing goes, and if they have drafted wide receivers in multiple classes after you, they're gonna give those guys a shot before you, because you had your chances. Right. And so, yeah, it feels like his opportunity, his window starting to dwindle there. It doesn't mean it's over, but like this got to be a big offseason, got to be a big training camp if you want to cement yourself, because they got young dudes, and especially like, AD, for example, got him in the second round. Like, I know they got you in the second round. They gave you your chances, but like they're going to want him to be successful so they don't look dumb in picking him. So they're gonna give him the chances. You got to make sure when your opportunity comes, you're right there.
Yeah. Absolutely. What about you, Austin?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think he'll be wide receiver 4. I think he'll get playing time, but yeah, he's out of the 4. He's going to be the odd man out.
Yeah, and and like I said, I'm very much of the mindset that competition is really either going to bring out the best in people or is really going to show you who you got. And now you have a wide receiver room that is a lot faster, a lot more talented. And I mean, it's not to say Alec Pierce isn't that, because I mean, Alec Pierce is another guy who's 6'4", who actually is like sneaky fast, but it just hasn't translated. So now you have to worry a little bit. But I mean, I've always been of the mindset that it's just like, I get everybody likes to use that word depth a lot when it comes to this team. But I'm all for competition. Like, it's just like, I don't know. I think Latu is probably maybe going to play like opposite Quiddy. I mean, he might possibly just go ahead and play in the same position as. Do you have any insight into that as far as like how they're going to go? Because I know it's just like they kind of played Latu in multiple spots.
Do I have any insight?
Yes.
I think that they probably, what I would do is I would put them opposite.
Okay.
I like having the bookends there because it makes it a lot harder to turn protections. As the defense, you get to dictate a little bit more what you're going to see when you have the bookends there, rather than maybe rolling those guys through at the same spot or trying to trickle them down the line of scrimmage, which teams do. And I think there's a place in the sub package. I say throw them both out there and create havoc.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Well, especially if you think about, DeForest Buckner in the middle, Grove. And I mean, if you think about those 4 guys out there at the exact same time, like the chaos that you can produce, and then you bring in linebackers randomly, and then you kind of blitz from different. You can do so many different things with those 4 guys out there, and it gives you so much flexibility. I'm very excited and then you have Charlie Patridge. I don't want to get off topic, but what experiences or chats or anything have you had with Charlie Patridge? Have you had the chance to talk to him at all, Josh?
I have not.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Very curious on how my hope is that he develops Kwity Paye's pass rushing abilities. And if he can do that, I think it'll again, we don't need 100 sacks from this team, right? What we do need is pass rush pressure and being able to pressure the quarterback, which is what the defensive line lacked. So be curious to see what that development looks like for him.
Yeah. And so, Josh, now moving on like further into the draft. So I need to know, how do you feel about safeties moving into the linebacker position? Because we saw that when they went with Carly's, who, I mean, 6'3", I mean, the guy hits. But how do you see about that type of transition when it comes to those players?
I think it's a more common transition now. Game's getting faster. I think the personnel's starting to get lighter. Having been a guy who moved from one level of the defense closer to the line of scrimmage, it's more difficult because you get to see less, but things happen quicker. Like when you're in the back end, you've got big vision of the whole field, but you've also got time to watch things develop, and the mesh point doesn't happen nearly as quickly. As you get closer to that line of scrimmage, you start to see through like a paper towel roll, basically. Like your vision's so tight, but then it's right up on you. And that's an adjustment there. So, those guys, I think they have to figure out the timing part. They have to figure out the vision part. And the other thing they got to figure out too is when you're used to playing in space, you use space as your friend. So you're a dude, you got space, you can move on somebody, make them miss. A lot of times those opportunities turn into collisions. And so you have to learn how to be a collision guy more often than a make a miss type of guy on defense. And so I like it because I think there's a need to have the skill sets from the back end move closer. I think the adjustment's a lot more difficult than just like bumping into a new position, just learning the playbook.
Okay, gotcha. And we saw that, and then we also saw another transition with Jalen Simpson going from safety to cornerback, or at least that's what the intention is. So, and I know that secondary wasn't necessarily something that you did, but I mean, super athletic. What do you think of that move in particular?
Yeah, I think that one, it's difficult. I think it's a little bit easier because a lot of the techniques, the fundamentals stay the same there. When you're a corner, it depends on if you're playing inside or outside. If you're playing inside, it's definitely a lot more like playing safety because, you're in the mix, things happen, you get to pass routes off. You're understanding combinations from that way. If you ever got to kick outside, that's a different world. You're on that island, just go ahead and buckle up and see if you can get the job done there. But I don't think the defensive back to defensive back part of it is nearly as drastic as moving from like DB to linebacker.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I'm gonna say it's just like for everybody, the thoughts on the two Jalen's, at least just going back to back safeties and then saying nope, they're going to be switching positions.
I think this is Ballard to a T, where I think he's really evaluating an athletic skill set. And he's saying, I want to pick that skill set, and I'm just going to put it at the position I think it fits best on my team. And I'm here for it because I think that makes evaluating really easy. I think it makes coaching a little bit more difficult. So you got to have the guys who can teach through the transition. That's the biggest part, especially young dudes coming in the league. Your head's spinning already. But the idea that they are adamant about the way that they can identify the athletic skills, the body type, whatever that they need at certain positions, I'm in love with because I see a lot of dudes who can't do that. And then you see it on Sundays, guys just look a little bit out of place.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing, right? And I maybe it was Chris that talked about it like in his post-draft interview or post-draft interview conference where he said, look, it's really hard to find like the best of the best that late in the draft. So you are looking for guys that can be flexible, right? Because you want to be able to find guys. You don't want to just churn and burn even those late round picks. You want to build a roster. In order to build a roster, you kind of need guys that can be flexible so that you can hope to find a spot for those guys. And I think that goes to show if you can play linebacker and corner, if you can play, corner and safety, your odds of making a team probably go up higher as well, especially if you're in the bookend of a draft where, again, there's so much unknown. If you can play special teams, and we see that all the time, even on this team, we see guys that start their careers off on special teams. I think Zaire Franklin's a great example of this. Started off on special teams, was a great special teamer. Last couple of years, our linebackers didn't work out, and now he got his opportunity, he took advantage of it, and he got paid because of it. And that's really how Ballard operates. And those late round guys are going to have to, that's where he tries to find those flexibilities is guys that can play multiple positions so that he can find a way to try to hopefully get you on the team.
Okay, what about you, Josh and Harish? I mean, Josh and Austin.
I do agree with what Josh and Harish said, and we have two guys like that already on our team that has transitioned. Ronnie Harrison transitioned from safety to linebacker, and he played extremely well. I think he got like 2 or 3 picks last year, switching their position after they traded or cut Maniac. So having extra guys that can do that really helps our defense, and it definitely helps Gus Bradley scheme with that, with those multiple guys that can switch positions. And then we saw that with Julian Blackman as well. So I'm excited to see those new guys coming in, and they could change those positions at any time. Play corner, play safety, play linebacker. And it's great, especially for cover 3.
Okay.
Yeah, it's always great to have flexibility of players can change different positions. I agree with what everybody said. I personally was a big pick of the Jalen Simpson pick. I don't know why. He was one of the guys that I kept drafting in my mocks, and I just liked watching his film. So I was glad we
Yeah.
got him.
Yeah. And like I said, we have the last two with Micah Abraham and Jonah Lualu. However, before we get into those picks, we had a chance to talk before we went live and found out something interesting. So you had the chance to play under both Grigson and Ballard. And I don't know if you may not have seen it, but I go back and forth sometime with Griggs and Truthers, because to me, I just was never a fan. It's just like I feel like he aced the luck draft, and I think he
That was
decided to
pretty much
sign.
it.
Yeah, he pretty much, like, after that he just signed a bunch of guys who were like 1 year away from AARP. But you had a chance to play under both Grigson and Ballard. So what was that like for in both instances? Just dealing with Grigson, and then being able to deal with Ballard as well.
I think I think your analysis on Grigson is spot on. Like the Andrew Luck draft was phenomenal. After that, there was a lot of questions about trades that had been made. There were questions about locker room, the way they came together. And I think this is the case with a lot of football people. So I don't want this to be like casting aspersions about somebody. Like, football dudes are difficult. And I think it's particularly difficult when things aren't going very well. And there's a scenario there. Ballard comes in. I feel like he's a regular dude. And I feel like he is relatable and like easy to talk to. And he did a lot of things well early on. I think there was, last couple years where, people were getting a little bit more unsettled and there was a little more noise around the Ballard situation. But ultimately, like, he's a very convicted guy. I think that he's done a lot of things well. I personally still enjoy going back and forth with him, but it's two different personalities. But I also think that, when you're coming to the end and you kind of know the end is there. And this was the deal with, Chuck Pagano there at the end. I love Chuck. And I played for his brother in San Diego, John. And I don't necessarily feel the same way about John. But Chuck was a rare dude because I think he knew that his time was coming to an end. And he was just like, all positive, and it was great. And I feel like most guys just aren't like that.
Right.
Yeah.
What is that transition like when you go from like one essentially front office to another? Like what is it like in the locker room? What is it like for you personally? Like that's a big transition.
It is. And I was always a guy who was at the end of the roster. And so it's like, you're always on edge. I think you're even more on edge too, because the personnel people who are making decisions, they're coming in with their own ideas and how they want to do things. So you want to make sure you're putting yourself in the best spot. I always felt like it was much tougher when the coaching staff was in flux, because that's when you're getting the overarching, scheme changes, system changes. Do I fit into this type of defense? I played in just about every defense you could play in. I played off the ball linebacker in a 3-4. I played outside linebacker in a 4-3. I played outside linebacker in a 3-4. I played end in a 4-3 toward the end of my career. Like I played just about every system in different positions, right? And that is super unnerving because it's like, damn, I got to learn all this new stuff. And I'm like, I'm doing stuff that's outside of my comfort zone. And oh, by the way, these guys don't know me and they didn't draft me. And I don't know if they really like me. And so I think when it's the coaches, you're super on edge about it. The front office people, by and large, they're off in a different part of the building. They come out and watch practice. They might shake hands a little bit. You don't see them all that often. So it's not nearly as intimidating as when the coaching staff is a little iffy.
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah, because we I don't know if you know, but Harish is not a Ballard enthusiast.
Well, I mean, let's the thing now.
No, we're not gonna listen. We can be honest. We
can be honest.
I think my thing with Ballard when you said the Ballard nervings have kind of like the rumblings have gone up in the last couple of years. That's why I kind of like turned my camera off because I was one of those guys, right? I think there's two aspects to Ballard.
Yep.
Aspect number one, he's an excellent drafter, excellent scouter. He knows talent. He sees talent. He speaks talent. I love this draft, right? At the end of the day, my challenge with Ballard and why I go back and forth with whether, I think he's the right guy for the team or not. I think there's two things at the end of the day, winning, right? Number two, building a team and team building. And I think that's still a thing that's kind of up in the air. And being able to build a team that can help win. When you see teams specifically in our division where they're like, 3-4 deep almost at every position, they're still winning football games, but then we're having different types of challenges and it's the same thing over and over. And I hear certain things like, I think the thing that kind of took me off on edge was when he made the comment was, and this was 5 years or 6 years in, right? This was like 3-4 years ago. My time here doesn't start until I draft a quarterback. And I get what he was trying to say, but then it's like, dude, it's been 6 years. Like how many more years do you want in order to get to that point? Like, I get what he was saying. It's hard to win when you don't have a franchise quarterback because the ultimate goal is the Super Bowl, right? But then there has to be stepping stones. And when you look at a couple of years, we didn't have wide receivers. He didn't go get it wide receivers. Last year, the whole cornerback thing, the secondary thing ended up blowing up in the face and cost us probably 3 or 4 games. And when you look at things like this, that's my piece of it that I probably disagree with Ballard on a lot.
I think that's perfectly fair. I really do. Like, I think that's a valid criticism of him, and I think it's one of the more difficult things to do. The NFL is so strange because hard salary cap sport. There's always a back and forth on, do we get old? Do we stay young? Where do we prioritize keeping guys? Things of that nature. What changes are happening within the league? How do we try to keep up with that? And so I think it's difficult. And to your point, hasn't been the best at that. I think it's perfectly valid.
Yeah.
See? Not completely.
No. Harish is watering it down because you're here. He's literally he's.
Look, I'm just using word. I'm just really good at using words, and that's how I'm describing it.
I have said a lot of things about people who I know and respect, but I've got a job to do, and to do well, sometimes I have to say things that piss people off, and it's perfectly fine. And I think we can do that, and I'll be good.
Well, in that case, I think his team building sucks ass from a show.
Jesus Christ.
I love the honesty.
So with that being said, we're actually going to go ahead. We got one more thing, and then we're going to let you go, Josh, because we know that you're gearing up. I know that you need to be on your P's and Q's because otherwise Brooke is going to try to, she's going to try to bother you a little bit.
Yeah.
But you can answer this question. It could be record. It can be what you see potentially based on the draft, based on the state of the team. And this is going to be, after Josh, will just be for everybody. As of right now, the Colts are blank.
I'm going to say ascending. And I think last year was a hard year to evaluate with the quarterback situation. But if AR comes back and he is close to what he's supposed to be advertised as, I don't expect him to be like a finished project. I think that there's enough around him offensively that he can take a step and do some fun things. And I think that they've addressed a lot here on defense. We even talk about, the last pick that they had, but like getting an interior rusher who's super athletic, like maybe not the guy that you want to have out there every down, but somebody who can be disruptive. I love that. And really, I look at this division and I like what the Texans have done, but I'm kind of looking around, man, and there's some funny looking stuff there. Like I'm not sure about I'm not sure about Trevor Lawrence and like all that stuff that's going down there in Jacksonville, Tennessee. Like I'm a Mike Vrabel guy, and I know that it kind of got tired there, but I'm not sure what direction that they're headed, and I'm not sure that they know. And at least I feel like the Colts right now. They have a direction that they want to go, and it's just whether they get there or not.
Yeah. What about you, Austin? As of right now, the Colts are.
I'm gonna say they're gonna be in contention for the AFC South champion.
Okay. I like that. Josh?
I'm gonna go record. Last year we won 9 games. It's close to winning 10 games. I have faith in saying that with the schedule we have, we can win at least 10 games and route to winning the division title for the first time since 2014.
Okay. Harish?
We're finally set up for success.
Okay.
Yeah. I think this is finally the year. Again, or actually, I'm gonna change mine to say the Colts are praying to the football gods to let them have a healthy season. Because I think if this team could stay healthy, I think they could do some damage in this, not just in the division, in the conference, right? I think they could be a team that, AR continues to grow and he continues to develop at the pace that they want him to. I think Shane Steichen, to me, has proven wonders that he is the coach for this team. When you have a guy that could put your team in the right place at the right time to be successful, you're going to win a lot of football games. And I think as long as the injury bug and the football gods just bless us for once, I think this team can do some very good things. And I'm very excited to see what on both sides of the ball finally.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, I'm going to say as of right now, the Colts are. And I'm going to be that guy that I promised myself I was never going to be. But I think they're top 3 team in the AFC if they stay healthy.
Wow.
And and the thing is, I will put my stake on that because not just because of the pieces, but I think also because we saw that Shane Steichen, even with being semi-limited with some of the things that he was able to do with the team last year, whether it was injury, whether it was not having AR, if everybody is able to be healthy, or at least the major pieces, the key pieces are able to be healthy, we already saw exactly what they can do. Now, everybody that was a rookie last year has one more year under their belt. So now you're going to be able to see them fully integrated into the offense or defense. And I think now adding a pass rusher like Latu, once again, if he can go ahead and be healthy, he's going to add an extra dimension. That pass rush, if it's better, it takes a lot of pressure off of a young secondary because of the fact that now quarterbacks aren't going to have all that time that they normally would have to be able to go ahead and get the ball out. So for me, like I said, if we are a team that can stay healthy, I could honestly see us being able to compete with, I'm going to say, almost anybody. I think we've had the Chiefs number the last couple times that we played them, and those were games that we weren't supposed to play. We had a 108-year-old Matt Ryan back there, and we were able to go ahead and make that eventual Super Bowl champion look not so much like champions. So, yeah.
And reset.
And like I said, if anybody's watching, you can go ahead and record that and try to paraphrase me, and I'm going to tell you exactly why you're wrong. But with that being said, like I said, that brings us to the end. Once again, we want to thank you, Josh, for coming on. You have been fantastic. I gotta clap it up because you know what? It's just like it's we like to have people on here, but it's different when you have somebody who's actually played it and can provide that insight. So you've been not just a hell of a guest, but it's just like just friends of the podcast. Hopefully, I'm gonna say maybe a little bit closer to preseason, maybe have you on again. Just go ahead and give a little bit more insight.
You just give me a shout. Let me know. I'll be back.
Listen, you heard it here. You heard it here first. Josh is going to be back later on, so it's all good. In the meantime, definitely want to know what you have coming up. If you have anything that you want to plug, whether it be with NBC Sports or Stadium, let the people know.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same old stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, Stadium, check it out if you haven't seen it. We've got unique content you can interact with, a ton of fun there. And then for those of you who also like college football, check out NBC Sports Big Ten College Countdown this fall. We've got an awesome show. We get out on location. We do it from studio sometimes, but whatever it is, we are your source for Big Ten football knowledge. So appreciate you guys.
Fantastic, fantastic. And guys, let the people know where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on Twitter at CookieAustin2.
You can find me on Twitter at the Uncle Gandhi. Also Thursday nights with my boy Tim Wayne on the Texas Longhorns Fan Battle Podcast. We got a big one this week. So yeah, come join us there.
Now you can see why the Texas excitement, Josh. You see, yeah.
And Mitchell makes a lot of sense now, huh? I love that pick. I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked.
I wish we had more time to explore that, but we don't. And Josh, what about you?
You can find me on Twitter or X at Who Is Josh Senior.
All right, fantastic. And you can find me at CJ Colts Fan. Once again, Josh, thank you for coming on. If you don't already, make sure that you download the Stadium app. Definitely live sports, live specials all the time. And yeah, just make sure that you do that. But other than that, thank you for tuning in. We will see you next Tuesday. And as always, just remember that Sam loves Jalen Ramsey.